Good morning, everyone. Let's start officially this webinar. Just some practicalities. My name is Tim Surmont. I'm part of the Risks to Public Safety and Security Unit of the EMCDDA, and we are hosting this webinar on the NPS module of the EU Drug Markets Report series. This is the seventh launch in this series. Just a reminder, the previous launch on policy analysis is now available in all EU languages. So if you go to the main page of the EU drug markets reports and modules, you will be able to see the policy analysis in any of the EU languages. Further practicalities, if you have any questions during this webinar, please put them in the Q&A section, not in the chat, because we will deal with the questions only in the Q&A. This being said, at the end of the webinar, please fill in a short questionnaire. It's very helpful for us to get some feedback to that extent. So for now, I would like to give the floor to the head of sector of the Action to New Drugs sector, Ana Gallegos, who will be hosting this section. Thank you very much.
Hello, good morning, everyone. Good afternoon for some. Thank you very much for joining us. I'd like to welcome all of you to the launch of the seventh module of the EMCDDA and Europol European Union Drugs Market Report. This is the latest module that will be launched under the European Monitoring Center for Drugs and Drug Addiction banner. The next ones, the following ones, will be already launched under the soon-to-be European Union Drugs Agency, EUDA. So this is part of the fourth comprehensive overview of drug markets in the European Union and features in the operational action plans of the European Multidisciplinary Platform Against Criminal Threats Impact. I'm not sure, yes, if there is a problem with the screen. Yes, here we have it. So today we're publishing as an online resource the in-depth analysis on new psychoactive substances, and you can access to the content through the QR code displayed on the screen just now, and all the material that will be presented this morning will be also made available online, and it's already available in the chat. You can click on it. During the webinar, we will provide an overview and key points on the EU market on new psychoactive substances in Europe, from production and trafficking to distribution and use and harms. We will also discuss the continued adaptation of the NPS market and increasing integration with the market for established controlled drugs, presenting an analysis that draws on data and information from the European Union Early Warning System, established over 25 years ago, from EMCDDA drug monitoring systems and Europol's operational information on serious and organized crime. We will also provide a comprehensive overview of key substance groups. Finally, taking a threat assessment approach, we will highlight key areas for action at European Union and national level and provide recommendations to respond to these developments. This morning, we will take also some time to guide you through the module, presenting some of the details. However, please note that there is a lot of information and additional material online, and I encourage you to browse through it and interact with the data at your own convenience. All the data-driven figures and graphics are interactive, and you can download the data if you wish to use in your own presentations and materials. What you can see on the screen just now is the interface of the module online, where you can navigate around the different chapters in the module. So this morning, in addition to myself, that I will be chairing this webinar, we have some problems, I think, with the sound. So we will have two speakers presenting this morning, and I will introduce each of them before they speak. After the presentations, we will have some time for questions. Please raise your questions in the questions and answers channel rather than in the chat. So now, starting with our first speaker this morning is Joanna de Moraes. She's a scientific analyst on new psychoactive substances at the EMCDDA. And Joanna is going to take us through the state of play of the NPS market and the distribution, supply, and harms of NPS, covering new synthetic opioids, cathinone stimulants, cannabinoids, including synthetic and semi-synthetic cannabinoids, new benzodiazepines, and ketamine. Joanna, you have the floor.
Many thanks, Anna. Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for registering for this webinar and for being with us today. I will begin my presentation with a definition of NPS. New psychoactive substances are a broad range of drugs that are not controlled by the United Nations Drug Control Conventions, but may pose similar health and social risks as those substances under international control. NPS include a range of different groups of substances, stimulants, cannabinoids, opioids, benzodiazepines, hallucinogens, and dissociatives. Many of these substances are intended to mimic the effects of internationally controlled substances and are sold as legal replacements for them. I would like to highlight that in this module, the term new psychoactive substances also includes substances originally monitored by the EMCDDA as NPS, but that have subsequently been placed under international control. For example, synthetic cathinones, such as 4-MMC and 4-CMC, synthetic cannabinoids, such as 4-MDMB-Binaca, benzodiazepines, such as etizolam, and opioids, such as carfentanil and isotonitracin. In Europe, a three-step legal framework of early warning, risk assessment, and control measures allows the EU to rapidly detect, assess, and respond to threats caused by NPS. The first step is EU early warning system, operated by the EMCDDA in close cooperation with Europol. EU early warning system plays a central role in supporting national and EU level preparedness and responses to NPS. As already mentioned by Anna, it is in operation since 1997, so for more than 25 years. And over that period of time, the market has undergone periods of significant growth and change. And not only in Europe, but also worldwide. Initially, the NPS market was characterized by a small number of NPS and consumers. Since 2008, the number, type, and availability of NPS have expanded rapidly across the globe, thanks to factors such as globalization of the chemical and pharmaceutical industry, and of course, the internet. NPS are now recognized as a global policy issue and a public health threat. And NPS affect regions, countries, and localities in different ways. The specific types of NPS that emerge and threats they pose are shaped by global supply chains and local drug situations, both of which can change over time. As NPS are not monitored systematically in many parts of the world, there is typically limited information about production, trafficking, and supply. There is also limited understanding of the epidemiology of NPS. Why is that? Because commonly used methods for studying drug use, including those for estimating prevalence, may not be suitable for many NPS. In Europe, the prevalence of NPS use in the general population tends to be lower than that of established controlled drugs, with the exception of ketamine. However, nitrous oxide is an example of NPS that has recently emerged rapidly in some countries, such as the Netherlands, with relatively high levels of use among the general population, especially young people. The use of some NPS, such as synthetic cathinones, synthetic cannabinoids, opioids, and benzodiazepines, may be relatively common among high-risk drug users and other marginalized groups in some areas and settings, for example, in prisons or among people experiencing homelessness. Despite what appear to be relatively low levels of use, some of these substances, in particular the synthetic opioids, have the potential to cause high level of harms. And if we think about NPS, most of us think about substances that are sold in their own right and make a range of different legalized products or dietary supplements or research chemicals. However, NPS can be also mis-sold or used to adulterate controlled drugs without consumers knowing. NPS are sold openly in brick-and-mortar shops and on internet, but also on the darknet and on street-level drug markets. The broad range of NPS and products, combined with the dynamic nature of the market, links with the market for controlled drugs, and differences in local drug situations, give rise to a complex picture across Europe. The capacity to detect and report NPS also differs across Europe, meaning that there is both under-detection and under-reporting in some areas. This is partly reflected in differences in the number of seizures and the quantity and types of NPS seized in different countries. By the end of last year, the EMCDDA was monitoring through the EU early warning system more than 960 NPS, 26 of them reported in 2023. In this slide, you can see a graph presenting number of NPS notified to the EU early warning system for the first time by category. As you can see, the number of NPS notified last year is a considerable reduction from 50 or so substances reported each year between 2016 and 2022. It is also a significant decrease compared with the peak year of 2014. The general downward trend in the number of NPS notified may reflect sustained efforts to control the sale of these substances in Europe. It may also reflect control measures in source countries such as, for example, China. If we have a look at the number of NPS detected each year following their first identification, we can see that every year since 2015, approximately 400 previously reported NPS have been identified on the drug market in Europe. It means that many substances remain in circulation, however, in varying amounts and mostly in small quantities. So, for example, in 2022, only 10% of the 400 substances were seized in quantities greater than 5 kilograms. However, these 40 substances accounted for 80% of the total number of NPS seizures during the year. In 2022, the EMCDDA received reports of just over 26,000 seizures of NPS from EU member states, amounting to 30.7 tons, most of which was seized in powder. Just to put this number into perspective, this amount, almost 31 tons, is 3 times higher than the amount of methamphetamine, amphetamine, and MDMA seized in EU in the same year. And as you can see in this graph, the quantity seized in 2022 was the highest quantity of NPS seized since the beginning of monitoring. It is important to note that a small number of large seizures of powders of synthetic caffeinones, ketamine, and synthetic cannabinoids by customs at the external EU border accounted for 97% of the quantity seized. We are currently working on finalizing 2023 dataset, and based on preliminary analysis, the quantity of NPS seized in 2023 was even higher, with approximately 41 tons seized. Please note that this number is subject to change as the final dataset is not yet finalized. Coming back to 2022 data, if we have a closer look at the quantity seized, we see that 87% of the quantity seized were caffeinones with 26.5 tons, mainly imported from India to Europe. This included 19.4 tons of free CMC, almost 3 tons of free MMC, and 1.5 tons of 2-MMC. In the module, you can find sections on particle substance group with more details, charts, graphs, and figures. And I would like to invite you to explore this data on your own. And now, very briefly, I would like to provide some key points for each of the substance groups, starting with new opioids. New opioids play a relatively small role in the drug market in most parts of Europe. However, as you know, many are highly potent and are of particular concern for public health because of the high risk of life-threatening poisoning from respiratory depression. Initially, much of the growth in this market was driven by fentanyl derivatives, but the number of new fentanyl derivatives appearing in Europe declined following a number of responses at national, European, and international level. With the shift away from fentanyl derivatives, we started seeing emergence of equally potent benzimidazole opioids, also called nitazoxanide opioids. By December 2023, the EMCDDA monitored 81 new opioids. 7 of them were reported in 2023, including 6 nitazens. Overall, the nitazens account for 20% of the total number of opioids monitored by EU early warning system. It is important to note that carfentanil continues to be the most commonly seized new opioid according to the EU early warning system data, and it continues to be an issue in the Baltic region. However, reflecting changes in the market and a decline in fentanyl derivatives other than carfentanil, in 2022, 34% of the seizures of new opioids and 18% of the material seized were nitazens. Most of the seizures of nitazens are reported in the Northern Europe. However, their presence on the drug market is probably more widespread. As of today, 21 of the 27 EU member states and Norway have reported the identification of 1 or more nitazen opioids in either seizures, biological samples, or collected samples since 2019. More recently, we started seeing some concerning developments when it comes to new opioids. So I already mentioned that last year, 6 new nitazen opioids were formally notified, and this is the highest number of nitazens notified in a single year. In addition, according to preliminary reporting, we see an increase in deaths with confirmed exposure to nitazens, with more than 150 deaths with confirmed exposure in 2023 compared to 43 in 2022. Also, for the first time, nitazens were identified at street level in France and Ireland last year, causing 3 localized outbreaks of poisonings. We also started seeing more seizures of fake medicines containing nitazen opioids, more diverse products, not only fake oxycodone tablets, but also more recently nitazens in fake benzodiazepine tablets, which is particularly concerning. And then emergence of dangerous mixtures. So, for example, trunk dope opioids mixed with xylazine, which is animal sedative and analgesic medicine. And also emergence of benzodope opioids mixed with new benzodiazepines, such as, for example, bromazolam. Now let's move to synthetic caffeinols. Synthetic caffeinols are the second largest category of NPS monitored by the EMCDDA, with 167 caffeinols, 17% of all NPS monitored. Until 2019, most bulk quantities of synthetic caffeinols originated from China. And since then, production has shifted to India, where they are produced on a large scale. The quantity of synthetic caffeinols seized in Europe rose sharply between 2020 and 2022, increasing to 26.5 tons in 2022. This increase was driven by a small number of large seizures by customs agencies in the Netherlands and Spain, originating from India. There are signs that a small number of synthetic caffeinols are becoming established in stimulant markets in Europe. Active monitoring is required to better assess the situation and identify and reduce potential health risks. Through the EU early warning system, we have seen over the last years re-emergence of free MMC and free CMC in Europe. While more recently, there are some signals suggesting re-emergence of 2-MMC in Europe. We also noted signals of a possible increase in synthetic caffeinols missold as MDMA or used to adulterate MDMA. In addition, the production of synthetic caffeinols in parts of Europe continues to grow, and you will hear more about this from my colleague Rita in a few minutes. Now, let's have a look at synthetic cannabinoids. Synthetic cannabinoids are sold as legal replacement for cannabis, but may sometimes also be sought in their own right as strong intoxicants. They are used by marginalized groups such as people experiencing homelessness, prisoners, and other vulnerable populations because they cause profound intoxication, are easy to conceal, and are cheaper than other drugs. Synthetic cannabinoids can pose a high risk of poisoning, both because of their high potency and because the amount of cannabinoid can vary greatly in the product. And this is very concerning considering the emergence of some adulterated products on the market in Europe. Since 2020 and 2021, low THC cannabis adulterated with synthetic cannabinoids and fake THC edibles containing synthetic cannabinoids have been identified. These products might be particularly attractive to young people and, of course, pose a high risk of poisoning. The EMCDDA currently monitor 247 synthetic cannabinoids, so 25% of all NPS monitor. In this slide, you can see a number of formal notifications of synthetic cannabinoids over the years. Between 2016 and 2020, the number of new synthetic cannabinoids appearing on the market was stable at around 10 per year, down from an average of 27 per year during the peak of the legal highs phenomenon between 2011 and 2015. And then in 2021 and 2022, there was an increase in the number of cannabinoids notified, which have possibly been developed to circumvent the generic controls introduced in China in 2021. Notable in 2023, the number of newly reported synthetic cannabinoids appearing on the market for the first time fell drastically to a 14-year low. At the same time, we started seeing emergence of a new market in semi-synthetic cannabinoids. Unlike synthetic cannabinoids, the semi-synthetic cannabinoids are mostly produced from cannabidiol, CBD, extracted from low THC cannabis hemp. Sold openly in a broad range of consumer product forms, including vapes and edibles, those type of products may be particularly attractive to young people. Concerns exist that potentially there could be a high demand for semi-synthetic cannabinoid products. And this includes from existing cannabis users and new consumers attracted to its effects and legal status, some of them young or otherwise inexperienced in drug use. In some cases, ease of access to products such as from vending machines that you can see an example in this slide may promote use. While initially the supply of bulk quantities of semi-synthetic cannabinoids was trafficked from the United States, there are now signs that they are also being produced in Europe. Again, you will hear more about this from Rita in a couple of minutes. Very briefly on new benzodiazepines. As of end of last year, we were monitoring 36 new benzodiazepines with one new one reported in 2023. Initially, new benzodiazepines were mostly sold under their own name, for example, phenazepam or pirazolam. This continues to be the case. However, increasingly, new benzodiazepines are also used by criminal groups to manufacture fake versions of commonly prescribed medicines, for example, Valium or Xanax, which are then sold on the illicit market. Users may be unaware of the substances or doses they are taking, increasing the risk of severe poisoning. There are also concerns over the potential spread of new benzodiazepines to prisons. And we can see it, for example, in seizures of papers impregnated with some new benzodiazepines. For many years, the market was dominated by two benzodiazepines that you're probably familiar with, etizolam and fluoprazolam. Following the international control of etizolam and fluoprazolam, which came into force in November 2022, producers and distributors appeared to switch to other new benzodiazepines, such as flubrazolam, clonazolam, and bromazolam. Subsequently, flubrazolam and clonazolam were internationally controlled in 2021. So it is likely that these substances will be replaced by others. In 2023, there were signs in both Europe, but also in other countries, for example, in the United States, of an increase in detections of bromazolam, mostly in fake versions of Valium or Xanax tablets. And then, last but not least, ketamine. Ketamine was one of the first NPS to emerge in Europe during the 1990s. And since then, it has become an established feature of the drug market in some countries. The quantity of ketamine seized and reported to the EU early warning system has varied over time, but has remained at relatively high levels in recent years, suggesting that this drug is likely to be consistently available in some national drug markets and may have become an established drug of choice in some settings. In addition, Europe seems to be an important transit and distribution hub of ketamine. And according to data from the EU early warning system, in 2022, there were 2.8 tons of ketamine seized in Europe. With this, I would like to finish my part and give the floor back to Anna. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Joanna, for this comprehensive overview on NPS trends, signals of harm, and integration of NPS, increasing integration of NPS into the controlled drugs market. So now the next speaker today will be Rita George. Rita is a scientific analyst on synthetic drugs at the EMCDDA, and today she's going to present key trends on the production of NPS, including recent signals on the increase of cathinone production in Europe. Over to you, Rita.
Thank you very much, Anna. Thank you, everyone who's joining us online. So I'm going to give a very brief overview of what the production side of things is, but I'll trust that you'll all spend some time later on going into more detail with the online module. So talking about NPS production is obviously challenging because in this case, we're not talking about the production of one single substance for which we know a couple of production methods, and that will end up in the market in typically a tablet or a powder. In this case, we're talking about the production of more than 900 substances, as Joanna just shown, and these substances belong to very different chemical categories, and they actually can end up in the market processed in very different physical formats. So actually, the production of NPS is really complex and can be really interesting and detailed. What we do know is that all these 900 or so substances, all of them need starting ingredients. So these starting ingredients can be chemical ingredients, we call them precursors, or they can actually be raw materials that are found in nature, so plants and fungi. This is a category that's tend to be less talked about in this field. So for plants and fungi, to get these substances to the consumer market, typically is simple products in the case of drying and grinding. So you get the raw materials, you dry them and grind them, and you sell them directly to the consumer. But more complicated processes can also be involved, such as extraction, which typically will result in concentrated oils. And this is the case, for example, for CBD oils. So CBD oils can be extracted from the hemp plant, and then those concentrated oils can be processed chemically to produce semi-synthetic cannabinoids, about which we just heard. On the other side, with chemical ingredients, they'll go through the normal chemical processing, the synthesis, yielding a crude product, which then, upon purification using any known method, distillation, crystallization, etc., will give you powders and concentrated oils. These powders, they can either be tableted, being mixed with excipients, for example, or sold directly to the consumer, but they can also be made into a liquid. And these liquids really are very versatile and can be used to make a number of products that show up in the NPS market. So you'll have new psychoactive substances being sold as herbal smoking mixtures. So these liquids being sprayed in inert vegetable material. Liquids can also be bottled up and be used as nasal sprays to administer new psychoactive substances. They can also be placed into pens for vaping. pressed into edibles, or even used to soak papers or blotters. And here, if we look just at this last row of these different products, as Joanna just said, many new psychoactive substances are sold as legal highs. Many new psychoactive substances are sold as research chemicals, as substances in their own right, but they can also be used to be missold to the consumer as illicit drugs. So tablets typically show up with new psychoactive substances sold as fake medicines. So this will be the case of new benzodiazepines or new opioids, for example. But they can also be, tablets can also be sold as fake ecstasy. So here, complexity starting to show up. Powders can be sold as fake heroin, fake cocaine, fake MDMA crystal. Herbal smoking mixtures sold as fake cannabis, and then e-liquids and edibles sold as fake CBD or THC. Here bringing a lot of additional complexity to the cannabis market, and then papers or blotters being sold as fake LSD. One interesting aspect of this specific product is that over the last few years, there have been repeated cases of papers being soaked in solutions of synthetic cannabinoids and then being smuggled into prisons. This because obviously they avoid detection by authorities. They can be sent as a letter, as a drawing, soaked in books, and then inside those facilities, they can be used by people in prison in tea or just being placed in a cigarette. So really what we mean when we talk about NPS production, we mean a number of processes, very different starting ingredients, which obviously these processes will need very different equipment. So there's not one specific way to identify an NPS production facility or an NPS production method, or even an NPS product. So quite a complex field. In general terms, when new psychoactive substances that are present in the EU market will typically be produced in China or India. So China or India has a large chemical industry, and both countries, and the production of these substances can take place in an industrial scale. So typically the substances are made here and then shipped to Europe in either the milligram scale, sometimes directly to consumers, or the kilogram or even larger quantities using global logistic companies, really. When we're talking about larger quantities, we'll typically be talking about air or sea cargo. And here, the Netherlands and Spain appear to be two of the most important entry points for large shipments of new psychoactive substances. When they get to Europe, these substances will then be processed and packaged locally. Typically, this is still what happens. So this was our understanding of the market, and to a large extent, this is still what happens. But sort of more recent developments have highlighted that the EU production of new psychoactive substances is really expanding over the last few years, and the sophistication and the diversification of this production is becoming more and more apparent. There are some advantages for organized crime groups or criminal entrepreneurs to engage with this production. First of all, there's knowledge there's equipment and there's experience in synthetic drug production in organized crime groups that are based in the EU. Sometimes one of the drivers for this can be decreasing availability of some substances or category of substances at the source as a result of more regulation in China or India, for example, or more law enforcement operations there. For some substances, some categories, there could be a specific demand for these substances at local level or maybe at regional level. And then obviously issues of risk diversification and reducing the risk of being detected by law enforcement agencies. Another added driver might be the fact that many times not only the substances themselves, but the ingredients that are used to make these substances may be not illegal. So they're not legal, but not illegal yet. So what do we know about production? While it is true that the number of NPS production sites in the EU does not reach the levels of perhaps other more established drugs, synthetic drugs like amphetamine, for example, it's very clear that the production is expanding. So here I am showing you the number of dismantled sites that were reported to the European instrument that handles this type of data. So an instrument that is managed by Europol and the EMCDDA. And in the period of 2013 and 2016, we had 46 dismantled NPS production sites. In the following period, we're talking about 110 NPS production. So clearly an expansion there in the number. Of course, this doesn't reach the numbers of amphetamine production that, for example, in this time was about more than 300 sites, but still a very clear increase. So obviously some interest there. And we know that the situation is rapidly expanding. So since then, since 2021, a very large number or a larger number of NPS production sites being reported to the EMCDDA and Europol. Okay, so what are these sites producing? The large majority of the dismantled sites were producing cathinones. So this is about 40% of all the sites reported. And then also relevant numbers producing GHB, GBL from GBL. So we're going to start by looking into cathinones. Cathinones are by far the category of NPS that were most produced in the EU in the reporting period that I've just shown you. Since then, so 47 sites between 2017 and 2021, and since then, many more reported, particularly in Poland and in the Netherlands. So what's happening here is that the production of cathinones is expanding so quickly that is really challenging our monitoring systems for the monitoring of illicit production sites. It's not difficult to make cathinones. This is a process that uses basically 2 steps, but importantly, the precursors used to make cathinones are not controlled substances. So these can be freely imported by organized crime groups interested in making these substances. I'm showing you there on your right, seizures of cathinone precursors in Europe. So in that period, 2017 to 2021, a total of 3.8 tons of cathinone precursors were seized in the EU. The issue here is that because these substances are not controlled, these 3.8 tons only represent the quantity that was seized when customs irregularities were detected, such as misdeclaration, for example. So a number of other amounts might have obviously passed through. It's evident both from what I'm showing you on the graph on your right and on the graph on your left that the production in Europe, so both from precursor side and also to the dismantled production sites side, the production in Europe seems to be focused on the control cathinones. So 4-MMC, mephedrone, 3-MMC, 3-CMC, 4-CMC, and also alpha PVP and alpha PHP. The issue here seems to be that large imports of cathinones come to Europe via India, so being produced in India, so non-controlled cathinones produced in India and then imported into Europe, but controlled cathinones, some of the controlled cathinones at least, are being produced in the EU. The size and scale of these labs varies widely, so you go from kitchen scale production sites in residential areas using very basic lab equipment to actually much larger industrial sites that are using specific equipment with heating and mixing, which is not necessary to make cathinones, but actually increases the yields of this. And one of the features that characterizes these big labs is these trays that I'm showing you there on the picture. So these substances are produced in large amounts. The crude oil is then placed in these trays, and then recrystallization happens in these shelves, and then this yields sort of big chunks of powder. The information about the destination of this big production is limited still at the moment, but most of this production that is occurring in EU territory seems to be aimed at local markets. However, in some cases, there's clear evidence that the production was destined elsewhere. So this is the case that I'm showing you here on the screen. A dismantled mephedrone lab dismantled in Austria in 2021. In this case, the cathinone was being placed inside beverage cans, such as the one as you're seeing there, and was being shipped to New Zealand, so quite far away from the EU. In this specific case, the precursors were sourced in China, so these are not controlled substances, as I just said before. The precursors were misdeclared as polypropylene to evade detection from the authorities, and then the substance was being manufactured with the aim of exporting it for outside the EU. So as you can see, quite a lot of developments here. Moving swiftly on, just to mention that GHB is the second most produced drug in Europe, judging from the data that has been reported to the EMCDDA and Europol, and this is in the period of 2017 and 2021. These were at least 34 facilities, mostly found in the Netherlands, but also in other countries. The production of GHB, again, is not particularly complex from the synthetic point of view. So typically it's a hydrolysis reaction. And so it's really, there's a chance that some of these production facilities escape detection. In some of the cases, the facilities were producing large amounts of GHB from GBL. Again, GBL may not be controlled for a number of reasons in a number of member states and even outside the EU. Again, production of these things might not be complicated from the point of view of the chemical reaction itself, but it does involve dangers, and there were issues with some some of these production sites, explosions, etc. But this is the case really through most illicit places where chemical reactions are occurring. For cannabinoids now, we're talking about a completely different scale. So only 5 sites reported from 2017 to 21. And most of these are mixing and packaging facilities. So again, the story that I was telling you before of the powders coming to Europe and then being mixed and processed domestically for the market. The reason why I am highlighting this is that we are getting early signals of these substances being actually synthesized in Europe. So this is quite a novelty. So for example, on your left side, you can see the picture of a seized warehouse and laboratory, seized in Greece in 2023, where cannabinoids were actually being synthesized. This is definitely a new issue when it concerns the production of new psychoactive substances in the EU. Moving from synthetic cannabinoids to semi-synthetic cannabinoids, which was mentioned by Joanna before. So these will be the substances that are not THC, but can be chemically very similar in terms of chemical structure. Semi-synthetic cannabinoids, production facilities, synthesizing and processing semi-synthetic cannabinoids really is an emerging issue in this field. So they'll still be cannabinoids, but they're they're produced in very different ways. So in this situation, what we have is hemp being extracted. So CBD being extracted from this vegetable material, and then these concentrated oils being processed into substances like HHC, HHCA, etc. I'm showing you here on your right one such facility. This was seized in 2023 in Romania. So a criminal network that imported, exported, produced and manufactured electronic vaping devices and edible products containing HHC, HHCP, HHCO, and a number of other substances. So really, we can be talking about small numbers, but really emerging concerns. And talking about even less, even smaller numbers, but even bigger concerns, the production of new opioids in the EU. Again, only 4 sites reported to the EMCDDA and Europol between 2017 and 2021. All of them mixing and packaging facilities. However, in 2020, additional sites have been reported. So the production of synthetic opioids in the European Union does not seem to be widespread from the point of view of our monitoring systems. Concerns mostly fentanyl and methadone rather than new opioids. In any case, there are some cases known. So in 2023, for example, a dismantled lab in Latvia where fentanyl was seized. There was also the doubt whether carfentanil was also being produced in this facility. More recently, so emerging signals appearing on this. Also in 2019, which is not recently, is a little bit more time ago, large seizures of fentanyl precursors occurring in the Netherlands. So while this does not mean that the production of synthetic opioids is occurring to a significant extent in Europe, it does raise some concern, and it does highlight the need to develop monitoring systems and to empower law enforcement to really detect these sites more rapidly. And that's pretty much all from me. I'll leave you in the capable hands of Ana Gallegos for the key findings and threat assessment.
Thank you very much, Rita, for this detailed insight into the production and trafficking in new psychoactive substances. So now we are in the last part of the seminar. So to finish off, we will review together the main key findings from the report. So NPS pose similar health and social threats to those drugs under international control. Since 2008, the new psychoactive substances market has diversified, grown significantly, and spread globally. NPS are now recognized as a global policy issue and a public health threat. The NPS market is highly dynamic and resilient, is characterized by a high turnover of cheap, available, and replaceable substances. And also, as we have seen, as Joanna has illustrated, NPS are also increasingly integrated with the controlled drugs market. An increasing number of old new psychoactive substances have recently re-emerged in Europe. Some of these, such as the cathinones, have been seized in industrial quantities in the range of tons. Between 2020 and 2022, record quantities of new psychoactive substances were seized. Large seizures of a few substances, as we have seen, mostly cathinone, stimulants, and ketamine, accounted for most of these seizures. At the same time, there are signs that the number of NPS entering the market for the first time may be slowing. The reason for this decline is still unclear and complex. Highly potent substances, such as synthetic opioids, also continue to emerge, and these are easy to conceal and traffic, as a few grams can make thousands of doses. Following the steep decline in fentanyl derivatives appearing in Europe since 2018, the equally potent nitazene opioids have replaced them. And finally, since 2022, a new market in semi-synthetic cannabinoids has emerged. They appear to be made from naturally occurring cannabinoids, such as CBD, as we have seen. They are sold openly in a broad range of consumer product forms, including vapes and edibles that may be particularly attractive to young people. So from the analysis presented here in the last part now this presentation, strategic priority areas emerged that will address the health and security problems associated with the NPS market. Actions to address current threats and increase preparedness are recommended here. So first, we should continue to support and strengthen the capacity of national and European Union early warning systems to increase situational awareness and to ensure that threats are communicated to all stakeholders in a timely manner. Second, continue to enhance international cooperation between the member states, European bodies and agencies, third countries, and key international partners involving a range of multidisciplinary professionals. Third, develop plans now to minimize the potential future impact of potent opioids. This requires strengthened monitoring, plans to assess and understand the risk of the threat, and action plans to prevent and mitigate threats and to communicate them to all stakeholders. Fourth, take measures to mitigate the public health threats associated with opioids, including ensuring access to the opioid antidote naloxone for healthcare facilities, people who use opioids, law enforcement officers, and laboratories. Fifth, share intelligence, assess threats, monitor the situation, and carry out research to improve understanding of the production and supply of NPS in Europe, the involvement of criminal networks, and the interactions that may exist between the NPS market and the more established controlled drugs market. Six, systematically integrate intelligence on operational responses to criminal networks involved in the NPS market into monitoring. Seventh, continue to support capacity building activities, including training, sharing of best practices, elaborating guidelines, providing specialist equipment for law enforcement agencies to increase the detection of shipments of NPS at European borders within the postal and parcel services. This is particularly relevant for customs. 8. Increase the ability of forensic science and technology and toxicology laboratories to identify NPS as well as their precursors and metabolites. This requires, again, support for training, resources for testing, and a mechanism for producing and sharing analytical data, and up-to-date analytical libraries adapted to a number of different instruments, reference materials, and expertise. 9th, systematically monitor and disrupt online marketplaces, particularly those selling wholesale quantities, both on the surface web and on darknet markets, and strengthen the partnership with industry to restrict such sales. 10th, enhance monitoring of precursors used for the production of NPS. And this will be a very important new task for the new European Union Drugs Agency, where the agency will have a very important role. And understanding precursors is a crucial element that needs to be improved, in particular as regards the role of source countries and trafficking between member states. And finally, support, last but not least, support research into the pharmacology and toxicology of NPS identified by the EU early warning system. So we are now finding ourselves at the final part of the webinar, and we have allocated a few minutes for questions from the attendees. I apologize in advance. It's 11 o'clock here in Lisbon, but we started 5 minutes late. So I think for those of you who are willing still to stay with us, I would like to open the floor for questions. And the first question, I'm going to take it myself. It's from our dear colleague from Swedish Customs, Jenny Aberg. Good morning to Sweden from Lisbon. So she's asking whether considering the change in the regulation of cannabis in Germany, there is still a problem there with semi-synthetic cannabinoids. And in this respect, I would like to share with you that in the module that's already published online, we are including detailed information on maps showing the number of seizures, quantities of powder seized, and quantities of herbal materials seized of cannabinoids. For the time being, this includes both semi-synthetic and synthetic cannabinoids. And in 2022, that's the data that we are publishing today in the module. Germany is still leading in terms of number of seizures and quantity of herbal materials seized. So this does not answer the question on semi-synthetic cannabinoids, because at the time we had only detected HHC, but I would advise also everyone to check our technical report on HHC and semi-synthetic cannabinoids. And this will also answer the question on what substances can be synthesized from CBD and to some extent in what proportion. So the next question is on nitazines. As we go, I'm reading it aloud. What are the routes of administration for nitazines in Europe? Oral, injectable? In Brazil, it looks like that it has been found in smoking herbal mixtures, often mixed with synthetic cannabinoids. And our colleague from Brazil is asking whether there is any information on the effect of smoked nitazines. So I would like to pass on this question to Joanna de Moraes.
Thank you, Anna, and thank you for this question. I think it was triggered by the very fresh publication that was published this week from our colleagues in Brazil. Maybe it's even coming from the author, where they detected nitazines together with synthetic cannabinoids in seizures in Brazil. So I perfectly understand the concern here. For the time being, this information about routes of administration for nitazens in Europe is limited. We know that in the beginning, the target population was heroin injectors. So in many cases, these substances were injected. However, as you might remember from my presentation, we increasingly see nitazens in fake medicines, so we can assume they are also consumed orally. What has been highlighted by our colleagues in Ireland during the outbreak in Dublin in November last year, the dealers who were selling nitazens were selling it as a new type of heroin. And they were advising customers to not inject it and instead smoke it. It was intended somehow as a risk harm measure. But still, many people overdose even when smoking nitazens. Outside Europe, recently nitazens were identified in so-called cash, sold in Sierra Leone and linked to many overdoses and even deaths. It was administered by smoking. And also in French territory, La Réunion, there were some overdoses last year during the summer and even after it in prison settings, and it was linked to smoking mixture containing nitazens. So this is a very complex issue, and it seems that we need to better monitor, to better understand the whole problem and different effects related to different routes of administration. So thanks a lot for raising this question.
Thank you, Joanna. We have the next question is on precursors, and which I would like to hand over to Rita George, and is the following: is there any ongoing work to regulate precursors for production of NPS at European Union level?
Thank you, Anna. Thank you for the question also. Well, the short answer is yes, in the sense that there is ongoing work occurring at the moment to come up with ways to be more flexible and faster in the control of precursors in general. And if I may pitch the EU Drugs Agency, which will come into fruition next week, the EU Drugs Agency will have a mandate to assist the European Commission in monitoring developments related to drug precursor and contributing to the implementation of the regulations. But the actual longer answer is that this is a complicated issue. So we're talking about 900 and so substances, almost 1,000. Many of them can be made in several different ways. So you can't control all of them, obviously, or else the chemical industry would come to a standstill. So the balance here is, how do you control certain sort of important substances, but also making sure that whoever needs those chemicals to make other chemical products in the legitimate industry can still handle them. I think on the cathinone precursor side, there's definitely some talk about that, even though the process that I am aware of hasn't started. But it's difficult to control just the ingredients for every single NPS.
So thank you very much, Rita. This will be a key new task for the new agency. I would like to remind everyone the new EUDA will be launched next week. So we will have challenging new tasks and many work ahead. So now, as I'm very conscious that we are over time, I would like to thank you all, and I would like to encourage you to please dig into the data, to read the analysis that's included in the report. It's very rich, it's well structured, it contains interactives, graphs, and tables. And I would like to apologize for the technical mishaps. I hope this hasn't posed many problems, and that we did not have time to go exhaustively through all questions posed in the Q&A channel, but we just are simply running out of time. So I would like to close this webinar by thanking again all of the speakers and all the colleagues at the EMCDDA and Europol and the member states and their partners in Europe, but not only in Europe, but also internationally. We are aware of this broad assistance today that made possible the production of this module. And I would like also to thank the support team that supported the launch. And finally, and most importantly, I would like to thank all of you, all the online attendees, for taking the time and interest to participate. Thank you very much to all.